Martin Luther King once said that a man must evolve all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, retaliation, and aggression. The foundation of such method is love. I want to share with you today how true that statement is. I've seen it and lived that. I firmly believe that conflict doesn't have to be destructive, and competition doesn't have to be about winning. I came from the world of business, and I'm also an Israeli. So I have a first-hand experience that conflicts and competition are the ingredients to create enemies and wars. As most of you probably know, during the last summer, the conflict in my country escalated and led to war. The fact that I have lived and experienced conflict and crises in the most extreme way made me realize that there has to be another way. After all, managing competitions and conflict is all about people and the dynamic between them. I want to talk to you about conflicts and competition, not the kind that wars are made from, but the kind that starts revolutions. I have found that when competition is managed correctly, it can create amazing ideas, personal growth, and momentum in our lives and businesses. Competitions force us to think creatively, to get an edge, but left alone to magnify and get out of control, competition leads to conflict. And we can avoid that if we learn to manage competition and use it to find a solution instead of creating a divide. In fact, I believe that competition can bring us closer together, create unexpected friendship, and lead into great opportunities. Both competitions and conflicts can lead into a positive and negative circumstances. The difference comes in how we manage them. I was so fascinated by this idea that I started researching about competitions and conflict in different areas. And in my research, I came up with 3 main keys. These keys may not be the final solution, but these are the very first steps for understanding, solving, and managing competitions and conflicts in our business environments and in our lives. The first key is something I like to call use flight mode. Have you ever been on an airplane and felt like the world is getting small while you're still the same size? From up in the sky, we get to see things from a different perspective. Everything seems less dramatic while we get to see the whole picture. Flight mode helped me to remove myself out of the situation, make big problems look small while I get to see the big picture. I believe that perspective is the very first key for understanding and solving conflicts. If we will manage to remove ourselves enough from the situation, physically, emotionally, or otherwise, we will manage to see that there is a much bigger story unfolding. As an example, I was very inspired when I watched the recent Hollywood film about Steve Jobs. While he was recruiting a new team for the Macintosh project, Steve Jobs shared his vision with his team, saying, "We cannot look at the competition, say we're gonna do it better. We gonna look at the competition and say, we are gonna do it differently." He changed the focus and the perspective of his team, and he changed each and every one of us. By the ability to look things differently, to look things from a different perspective, we can achieve a much bigger and different results. The second key is what I like to call be a gentleman. The most fascinating thing I discovered in my research was that managing competitions and conflict is all about us as people. It's a simple enough idea, but also a complicated one. I see gentlemen as someone who will listen, be kind, won't criticize others unfairly, and will share his opinion politely. It is all about listening and understanding the other side. Treasured ability true gentlemen and ladies have. When I integrated the flight mode with the ability to see things from a different perspective, together with the be a gentleman with the ability to listen and understand the other side, I was amazed to realize that in a conflict, both sides are right. Each one from his own perspective, but they're both right. And that was startling to me because I love classic American movies when there is always the good guy and the bad guy, the right side of the story and the wrong side of the story. And I was amazed to realize that in reality, there is no right side and wrong side. Both sides are right, and the difference is to create an understanding between both sides. I have learned the hard way that in most aspects in business, there is no one school solution. And the closest thing to universal is that. I have learned to set aside everything I know, everything that is familiar for me, and just focus on the person that is sitting in front of me. Listen to what he wants, he needs, and follow only that. We may never agree, but we have to work on creating understanding and working on build a trusting bond in order to create a special solution for both of us. Years back, I worked for a company that had a past conflict with a different company. When I approached that company, trying to gain them as a customer, I've been told that by one of the executives there that they're not gonna have any business with us. Now, as a stubborn Israeli, I obviously didn't give up. And every time I visit in that area, I used to meet with that executive. And in those meetings, I used to share my idea, my understanding, my point of view on his product, his market, his competitors. With time, non-officially, I became one of his trusted advisors. I became one of the person that he chooses to consult with anytime he needs to take an important decision in his company. That executive kept his promise. He didn't buy from me. I invested 2 years in that relationship. Spent my time, my efforts researching studies on his market, his product. I obviously didn't follow any business school method or listen to any of my colleagues saying that I was just wasting my time while they were all right. Up until one day, just like that, that executive showed up to one of our meetings with a huge contract for me to sign on. Needless to say, it was one of my biggest closings so far. That executive chose to work with me because I managed to present a different point of view for him. I was being a gentleman. I managed to disagree everything I know, everything that was familiar for me, and just focus on what he wants, he needs, and follow only that. With that executive, there is another key that works here: perseverance. Perseverance is key for life. The third key in my system is to never give up. Now, some of you might be thinking, does never give up really helps us solve conflicts and competition in our lives? And I say yes. We cannot give up on the basic principles that guide us. To do so would be to abandon our beliefs and dreams. With that executive, I never gave up. I put lots of efforts and time, but I never give up because I believe I can build trusting relationship with this guy. Can you imagine what would have happened if you would let go on the things you believed in? I have learned that in life, I can fail. We can fail, but we cannot give up on the things we believed in. In my research, I have found that competitions and conflicts gives us many gifts and opportunities. It allows us to look at others and the world differently and push the human race forward. Let's now look at ourselves. What can we learn from competition as it relates to our own journey? Whether you see yourself as a competitor or not, chances are you have a story to tell about a time when competition helped you to achieve something you never felt was possible. You may also remember a time when competition led to a conflict in your life. Perhaps that memory has left you with a negative association. In my own experience, competition helped me to be more confident, to understand my strengths and weaknesses, to move up in my career, to manage my ego and be a much better loser. When I got my first sales position, I was terrified. I have no experience, no knowledge, and I needed to manage the competition in two aspects. Inside the company with my sales colleagues and outside the companies with companies I compete with. In order to overcome this, I needed to put my ego aside and follow some sales leaders. When I observed this leader's technique, I realized that them old school's technique aren't working anymore. Now, that was before I put these 3 keys on paper and really thought about it. But even then, what really helped me to overcome this was that I managed to see the big picture and understand the companies and the products that I'm going after. I managed to approach my customers right, not to preach them, but to listen instead. And I never give up. Although I was truly terrible at the beginning, I never give up because I believed I can. Competition forces us to analyze what we're good at and what we need to work on. It helps us to develop an understanding of ourselves, which helps us grow and become more confident in our ability to succeed in this world. Conflicts can help us go into a transformative changes in our business environments and in our lives. And these changes are the key to succeed and the key to communicate with each other. I believe that approach will lead us to a better future. If we will learn to utilize these 3 keys, that approach will lead us to a future which Dr. King would be proud of. Thank you.